even operating in the United States with the help of NGOs, are running the immigration crisis. This includes direct payments being made to illegal aliens and asylum seekers in the form of debit cards and even envelopes of cash. And the money for this is coming heavily from American taxpayers. This is according to Todd Bensman and his extensive reporting throughout Latin America. Bensman is a senior national security fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies and an award-winning journalist covering national security topics with a focus on the Texas border. He's also the author of the new book titled Overrun: How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History. Hey, Todd Bensman, thanks for being back on Crossroads.
Great to be here.
Well, Todd, you did a new book on the U.S.-Mexico border crisis, Overrun, and great work on it, by the way. You talk about something actually I've been talking about too, but you give a lot more detail on it, which is that the United Nations is paying illegal aliens to come to the United States. Tell us about this. I mean, how is the United Nations paying people to come here?
Well, it is true that the United Nations is very hands-on involved on the migrant trails all the way down into South America, straight up to the Texas border, all along the Texas border, in a number of ways. And in the most visible way is that they are showering the immigrants, the U.S.-bound immigrants, with cash in the form of debit cards, and you can ask them, the immigrants, to show you their debit cards, their UN cards. They'll pull them right out for you. It's, they get monthly stipends that are put on there every month, every 2 weeks.
How much money, roughly?
It depends. It's pegged to local cost of living. So if they're up near the Texas border, I found cards up there that were getting close to $400 every 2 weeks.
Wow.
So $800 a month. And in southern Mexico, like in Tapachula, down there on the Guatemala border, it's a little cheaper to live. And so it's like, more like a couple thousand pesos. Just a month or so ago, I was in Monterrey, Mexico, and found, the debit cards there, and they were, 2,800 pesos a month, which is like $120 or something. But the point is that this is a sustainability program. It's a program where the United Nations is making sure that people are able to stay the course, and that maybe when they're contemplating making the journey, and they're not sure they have enough money, they know in the back of their minds that they'll kind of be okay. So they'll pull the trigger because the UN will likely hand them cash or in these debit cards. But it's not just the debit cards. They also are providing vouchers for long-range transportation. They're paying the bus fares, the bus tickets, and also for lodging in youth hostels or hostels and in hotels all along the way. When you take it all together, they have all of the basic necessities of life on the road to the U.S. And that is a real deal. I know there's been some challenge about that, but there is a budget out that is in a public realm where the United Nations says in 2023 they plan to spend $450 million on cash-based assistance programs or cash-based intervention programs, CBI, and they just lay it out exactly what it's for, all three of those categories that I just told you.
Wow, geez.
One other thing I should mention that this is U.S. taxpayer funded.
So that money's come from Americans?
Yes, the majority of it, yes.
Jeez. So I actually found some of the same things when I was down at the U.S.-Mexico border. From what I saw, it was the United Nations bankrolling a lot of it. Is that what you're seeing as well? It was through the State Department bankrolling a lot of it. Do you also see it's the State Department bankrolling it through the UN?
Yes, that's one of the major sources. There's a division of the State Department that's doing that, but the United Nations is a multi-headed hydra, and so is the United States and its funding mechanisms. So There's money coming from all different places. From the Congress, from different parts of the executive branch, and it's really hard to figure out and untangle. I still have not been able to untangle, and neither have certain congressional offices that are working pretty hard on this right now. There's a lot of outrage, especially on the Republican side of the aisle, that U.S. taxpayer money is going to support, aid, and abet this sort of travel activity, smuggling activity, if you will, to sustain people on the way. And that's not all the money goes to. A lot of that money goes to psychological programs on the trail, where, for example, if migrants are turned down for asylum in Mexico, they can't proceed, they're stuck. They have to apply for asylum and get this card in order to get to the border. But if they get turned down, they can go to one of these UN-funded agencies and get memory excavation, psychological memory excavation.
What's that?
They are traumatic, have traumatically forgotten the actual persecution that would get them the asylum. And it's like 90% success rate, and then they are able to continue on. They also do a lot of training. American lawyers, for example, are all over Mexico doing training sessions on your human rights under the U.S. asylum law, which is basically a way to say, watch out what you say to the asylum officers. Here's what you shouldn't say, and here's what you should say. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the United Nations down there.
Jeez. Now, you said something really interesting just a bit ago. You said that the UN budget just came out, and the UN budget just states in plain language that they have all this money for these programs. Tell us about the UN budget on this.
Well, the UN projects that it needs about $1.7 billion for fiscal year 2023 and 2024 together to aid the migrants and people who are in place waiting to move, and people that are actually moving. That's a large amount of money, but it is all distributed among about 221 non-governmental organizations. A great many of them are U.S.-based organizations that have arms down there that are taking this cash and aiding and assisting the migrants down there. And the budget document, it's online. Anybody can read it. Anybody can access it. Nobody has written anything about it other than me, but you can see the entire list of NGOs right there, and how much money that they're each expected to need for their role in this mass migration.
Jeez. So I know that when I was on the U.S.-Mexico border, I found some similar things. I found that the International Organization for Migration was kind of the big kind of organization operating a lot of this, and they were working with the NGOs as well. So what's the relationship between IOM and UNHCR?
Well, I mean, the United Nations, I mean, one is they're both for the same purpose, helping either refugees or migrants as they pass through. They both have sort of overlapping missions, if you will, and so very often you see them housed together, and they're working with one another. They have stations all along the trails. I mean, you can find either UNHCR or IOM aid stations. Like kind of if you're running a marathon, wow. I've run a couple of marathons, every 3 miles, there's like an aid station and you can't wait to get there, right? Sometimes you're running extra hard just to get to the aid station. And I think that's kind of how these things are set up to operate, so that you can be assured before you leave home that you're going to get what you need. Nobody's going to let you starve or sleep in the streets for long anyway. Down there.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm curious too, because this ties into some of the ways that things are being framed here in the United States. They'll say, for example, they're not giving money to illegal aliens. These are only for people applying for asylum. These are only for refugees. And there's a difference between the illegal aliens and the refugees. In terms of these organizations, how do they differentiate? And how does a person go from being just a normal illegal alien to being part of the whole UN system?
Right. Well, the narrative and the view on that is that we are going to put blinders on for the technical purpose of not knowing for sure that they're going to the U.S. border. If we know that they're going to the U.S. border, like know that they're going to the U.S. border, then you might be participating in something illegal. So typically what you'll get from these agencies is, especially if they're like in Mexico, we're just helping them get their Mexican papers. They need their Mexican papers. So, but everybody knows that within a day or three of them getting those Mexican papers, that they're all going to be on the riverbanks of the Rio Grande or in the river on their way to the Gulf of Mexico. You can go to the river on either side, Texas or Mexico, and find all those very freshly minted Mexican cards and visas and different papers.
I've seen those personally, yeah.
That's right. And that's
covering the ground. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, any NGO or United Nations officer or somebody who tells you that this is strictly for the country that we're in is just a liar. Everybody knows exactly what the game is. I mean, come on.
Well, break this down for me though, because you're saying it would be illegal if they're knowingly helping basically traffic them across the U.S.-Mexico border, right? That would be illegal. But they have operations going all the way down, and they also run the NGOs and the buses, which are facilitating this. If they're involved at every step of the way, including on both sides of the border, and they're running the operations and giving them bus tickets, how do they not violate the law by doing that, basically?
Right. Well, the law breaking will typically happen when someone crosses a border without permission. And that goes for every country. No country really anywhere, has completely borderless entry and exit. So if you cross from Guatemala into Mexico, technically it's illegal. You've broken the Mexican law. If you cross into Guatemala without permission, you snuck in over the border through the jungle or whatever. So I think that's kind of the minimum threshold of law breaking and the most common one. And everyone knows that if there's a large group of Haitians that are wanting to move north, but the Mexicans are holding them back until they get their papers, that nobody is coming for the great Mexican dream. Okay, nobody is coming for the great Mexican dream. We all know that. So there's this artifice. There's this kind of fig leaf on everything for, I think, legal purposes.
Well, and that ties into something interesting that you had an article, I believe, in the New York Post talking about how basically on the Mexico side with the Mexican government, they had actually, it looked like, timed policy with the election of Biden. Can you tell us about that? How does that fit into this? Tell us about that.
Well, there's a lot of competing narratives. I mean, one thing the book, strives to accomplish is to just settle once and for all when this thing started and who started it. The subtitle of the book is How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Mass Migration or the greatest border crisis in U.S. history. And that is very true. And I feel like I support that very strongly in the book. One of the pieces of information that has very rarely been reported, I can't really find it having been reported anywhere. You can find it in some NGO Facebook postings and things like that, is that remember that the Trump administration in its final year had been doing a lot of pushbacks. Yep. Under Title 42, everybody's getting pushback, remain in Mexico, lots of family groups, unaccompanied minors, everybody was just getting stuck in Mexico. And Trump said to the Mexicans, if you don't take them, we are going to slap you with progressive trade tariffs that will destroy your economy completely inside of a month. So the Mexicans complied all through the Trump administration, but they hated it because especially family groups are expensive, high maintenance, difficult to house. Under Mexican law, they have to house them. They have to do something to take care of them. It is an incredible burden to the Mexicans, and they hated it. So they saw the American election coming down the pike, and they drafted a law that was predicated on Joe Biden winning the election. And so within 72 hours of him winning the election, the Mexican Congress passed this law clandestinely. And believe it or not, that a Congress can do something like that without anybody knowing about it. But they did, and it was on Lopez Obrador's desk by November 11th. He signed it that day, and that law had the effect of requiring that all Mexican detention facilities empty themselves of these family groups. And that they be referred to these kind of private NGOs in Mexico that none of them were going to go to. They all headed straight to the border. Interestingly, about that law, which I have a photo of the law in the book and the name of it, and it's all in the book, described in more detail. But they put a delayed timer, delayed fuse into this so that it wouldn't implement until Donald Trump was almost transitioned out. It only went into effect on January 11. There were 10 days left for the Trump administration to complain about it or do anything. And of course, it was too late. So the families emptied and rushed to the border. Thousands upon thousands rushed straight to the border, and they waited 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown. On Inauguration Day, the Biden administration ordered CBP to stand down on Title 42 for family units. The Mexicans said, "Here they come. We're not taking them back. We have a law. We can't put them in custody or detention. You have to take them." And so they did. And that day is when it all began. They poured over the southern border in Texas, mainly across from Tamaulipas. That was where the majority of them, and it was on from the first day with the family groups. That's how it started. Mexico wouldn't take them back. And the whole thing was predicated on the Biden administration taking it. Trump would have done progressive trade tariffs, right? But they wagered that Biden would not do that, and he didn't. They took them all and have been taking them ever since.
Well, and if we take that in context of the Biden administration basically opening things up, and then take into context as well the State Department bankrolling the United Nations, which is then openly in its own budget proposal paying for this, it seems like it's being done knowingly based on that alone. What is the agenda for the U.S.? Why are they financing this and then trying to make it sound like it's some random crisis, and they're not telling us about that?
So, for purposes of our program here, I'll try to, because I have a chapter 4 of the book is titled "The New Theologians," and I try to answer this question as best I can with reporting about how a cabal of really hard left, out of mainstream, Democratic mainstream party orthodoxy was able to ascend to real power in the White House after January 2021 and seized control of the immigration portfolio. They still have it. They still have it to this day. And they came in with an ideology that is, like I said, no Democratic Party traditional icon like Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or anyone going all the way back would ever have countenanced any of these policies. And their policies were, basically threefold, which is, end detention, end deportation, and provide amnesty to the maximum number of people already here as possible. In other words, to neuter the Immigration and Naturalization Act, the set of laws that are our enforcement. That's what we do. We enforce. These are the laws that require that we, have a secure border. And they did that. They systematically did that from piecemeal. And I take you through it. Why they did it is, I believe, twofold. One is just pure ideology. They have been trying to get this borderless ideology into power for 25 years. The Democrats have always turned them down. You're just staying in the closet. Guys, get out of here with that stuff. Nobody's going to vote us into office with that stuff. But this time they got in, and they did it. And I think it's just the gratification of being able to implement your ideas about the global, borderless global world. The other thing is that, unfortunately, like everything else, there's always follow the money. And the fact of the matter is that the world, the industrial, I call it the migrant advocacy industrial complex, which is this really large constellation of NGOs and migrant resettlement groups and advocacy groups, from which all these people come from. These are the people that have the authority right now over the portfolio. Well, those organizations get hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars in federal contracts. This is, in the end, about cash, about federal contracts, about money going right into the coffers of those organizations. And the ones that aren't getting direct contracts, often no bid contracts, I might add, are still able to profit enormously by just simply retail marketing for donations. Look what we're doing. Look at the gravity. Look at the great need for our services down there. Look at this crying baby, cute little baby here that needs our help, and people are giving money. And I think that a lot of this is driven by that. Nobody will ever admit that. They would never admit this. And so it's a little combination of both of those things. That's it in a quick nutshell. That chapter, the New Theologians, I look at this as a religion, that these people are dedicated to this as a religion, just like maybe a lot of churches and pastors dialing for dollars on TV or whatever. And that's pretty much what this is. I'm not buying into a lot of the theories about building up the Democratic voter base. I don't know about that. There's a lot of other theories about it, but that's my best shot at this.
Wow. Geez. I want to address a couple other points. I know that I've read some fact checks from some of the corporate media about your work. One of the fact checks was they claimed that you were false on stating that basically the people handing out the money to the illegal aliens or migrants, they were saying that these were not, in fact, UN agents. Apparently, the logic behind this was technically they were not, but they were volunteers. And so based on this, they said the whole thing was fake. Can you address this for us?
Sure. That was the first time I discovered this was in Reynosa, Mexico, at a shelter. And there was a plastic table with some chairs, and they had stacks of credit cards that they were giving out to a long line of migrants. And I'm like, what is this? I took some pictures. I interviewed the workers, and I said, where are you guys from? And they said, we are from the United Nations. We're with the IOM. And so in a tweet, I put that out but apparently they're technically not paid by the IOM. They're like a volunteer NGO that works for the IOM. So they got me on like, okay, the guys that were at the table were like these volunteers that work for an NGO directly, not the IOM. So I guess the credit cards aren't true. I don't know.
Yeah,
Somehow they
handing
were
out
trying to
credit cards
extend.
with the United Nations logo on them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that there was part of that. And then another one was that, those aren't technically debit cards. They're called cash cards. Okay. But I will say that the United Nations own documents and records that are available online call them debit cards.
Well, I found that ridiculous because when I was researching this, because I was down there as well, and I was shocked to find that they were giving people money, and I was trying to look up online, are they giving people debit cards? And I saw the fact checks there, they say false, these are not debit cards, and they have their own language to define what they are, but in the description they're debit cards. But
Right.
they're basically claiming anybody who states this is false. Based on the fact that the United Nations basically has its own language on how you're supposed to describe them. But you said actually in the budget, they actually say this, right? They actually say that that's what they
Yes.
are in the budget.
Yes. Yeah. They hand out the cash in different ways. Sometimes they give it out as vouchers. Here's a hotel over there, and we're giving the hotel money, and then they are giving us these vouchers in return, which we give to you. And there are different ways of getting the money. One of the UN's own documents that I reported on said that they also sometimes gave out cash-filled envelopes.
Oh,
So
no.
there must be some areas where the stores are so primitive that you can't run a debit card or a cash card, so they give them out directly cash in
Jeez.
local currency.
And what's the process for register? Like if one of these illegal aliens is like on their way or whatever, or what's the process of getting in with this? Does the United Nations like advertise for this? Do they have representatives there promoting it, or do you have to go there and try to do it? Like, what did you see based on the process of them entering that system?
Well, there's a few ways. I have seen billboards. They advertise it on billboards, and also. For example, in Mexico, when you cross into Mexico and register with the Mexican authorities to try to get your visa or whatever, they will tell you there, if you go next door to the UNHCR, you can apply for aid and assistance. And so, I've spent a lot of time in line with all of those people, and you can see the UN workers, taking with their clipboards, and they're all going through it. I've got it all on video, and nobody denies that this is happening, really. I mean, I know that you say there was this fact check, but I've since interviewed the UN on the record in email. They are very proud of this program. They don't deny the program. In their view, this is a lifeline, life-saving lifeline for vulnerable migrants like women and children that run out of cash on the way. So that nobody's denying this, really.
Well, one of the big questions I had too is this human trafficking? We hear stories that the cartels are running, the Disney-looking lions at the borders and giving people wristbands and killing people or raping people. Where do the cartels and criminal organizations fit into this whole system?
Well, they fit like a hand in a glove. They're very, integrated into the process. The smugglers and the coyotes all along. It's not just the cartels on the northern Mexican border. There are smuggling organizations all the way down into Colombia and Ecuador. All along, there are different groups that will help immigrants who have some cash to make the next move to the next border and the next UN aid station. Everybody knows this. I was a month or two ago in Monterrey, Mexico, at the largest shelter in Mexico, and I interviewed the director, and he was explaining, all the coyotes are right out here over here, and they're all making deals, and everybody knows about this.
Yeah.
All of these shelters, and they're all surrounded by opportunists and criminal organizations that are either trying to coerce or just sell package deals to the U.S. And
Package deal.
everybody knows it. There's not one person down there that doesn't. This is common knowledge. Every UN worker, every Mexican official, every cop, every volunteer knows that they are hand delivering these immigrants right into to the smugglers, some smuggler somewhere.
And how are the American people being kept in the dark? Everyone knows it, but the American people aren't being told.
Well, the question of how the Mexican cartels deal with migrants is, I think it's fairly well known. At least that part is the Mexican cartels, and that maybe they don't know it. I don't know. I'm too close to the story possibly, but you can't cross the U.S. southern border in most places without paying the cartel. They control the crossings. They assert control, and they monetize their control. And they have made billions and billions of dollars off of this particular event, which is ongoing, in the sense that they, have an inventory control system in places where you can see the wristbands. If you've been down there, you probably have seen those wristbands. They cross every single one of them. Scott, even the infants have them tied around their little ankles, and those are like at a water park. You have to pay at the entrance, and then you get one of those, and you get to be in the water park, right? So that's been going on, and those things all end up littered all along the riverbank, and many other places you have to pay the cartel to cross. There are a few places that you don't. But for the most part, we seem to just put a blinder on about that. The Biden administration, through the Border Patrol, orders that they escort them all in and process them.
Yep, I saw that too. Yep.
Yeah, hand delivered, and I write about this. I mean, you can, in the book, where you can watch Jose, the smuggler who's got the paddle, pull up right next to Border Patrol and say, "Hey, Frank, how's it going? Doing all right. How many loads more you got tonight, Jose?" Siete. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll see ya. He goes back, and they're just all kind of working together. It's unbelievable. You couldn't make this up. It's like, but it's the way it is, and we I guess countenance it. We don't seem to care that these policies are just fabulously enriching these criminal organizations that funnel the money into paramilitary weaponry like tanks and shoulder-fired missiles and fully automatic 50 caliber machine guns and 30 caliber machine guns and Claymore mines, and can challenge the Mexican central government to any fight over anything.
Yeah, what's our tax
we don't
dollars?
Seem to care about that.
Our tax dollars hard at work, it seems. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, Todd Bensman, thank you for being here, and thank you for telling us this.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the attention.